just a little bit about me. This is kind of like my big moment when I got to be Geek of the Week here in Seattle, which is sort of kind of a technology piece. And I guess, what's interesting is I started my career in urban planning, urban design, and I found that these people called developers were really kind of messing things up. And so I sort of said, well, I could either continue to be sort of this incredible defense, or I could go on the offense. So I ended up going back to school and getting a master's degree in real estate finance and also a master's in city planning, both from MIT. And then immediately went into investment advising and really sort of understand sort of what drives value in the real estate community. And I think the interesting thing that I've brought to my profession, which has been really, really fun and really rewarding over the last, I would say probably the last 7 years, being here in Seattle, is really working to sort of like show the community, the real estate community, that actually good, thoughtful design that considers humanity, actually people pay a premium for it. So if you get an opportunity, I think it's pretty fun to sort of see maybe 400 Fairview in Seattle. It was completed a couple of years ago, and I think it starts to highlight the fact that I think as we think about the changes that are happening in the way that we work today, that the way in which lifestyle is really entering into the workplace, and we need to really sort of shift the nature of work. In other words, bringing community into work. And I think some of the technological changes and technological things that are coming forward will kind of reinforce why the nature of kind of our cities do need to change, just to kind of introduce humanity. So that's kind of a point I wanted to make. And what I want to talk about quickly today is kind of a lot, and it's just going to be a little bit of a whirlwind sort of stuff so that we can kind of be on stage. But many of these technologies you may have heard about, and some of them, folks are definitely talking about their future impact on the city. But maybe you haven't seen them all together, and so I think it's a good sort of framework for us to talk about. But I also want to just kind of talk about what is innovation, because I think it sets up, when we start to get barraged by all this sort of innovation or all of this technology, is what is it that we do to thrive? And that will be sort of my last point. So first off, innovation, which I think is really interesting, and it's sort of something I like to keep going back to, is really first starts from imagination. And imagination is this ability to see things that don't exist. And then using that imagination to solve problems is actually creativity. And then applying that creativity to really new and unique solutions is really innovation. Now, the important thing in all of this is that to get to innovation, you've got to have imagination, and you've got to have creativity. And what people are sort of realizing, researchers who are doing a lot of neuroscience sort of work, are realizing those people who are the most creative and are the most imaginative have the most experiences, right? So they're really kind of tapping into sort of what's happening in the right brain by getting out there, probably not staring at their computer screen so much, and really being able to listen and have empathy and things of those natures, really enrich, enliven sort of experiences. And those things actually lead to creativity. Whoop, that wasn't me, I hope. Lead to creativity and innovation. Okay, so these are the kind of the key ones I just want to kind of talk about innovation-wise that I do believe are kind of influencing society, which ultimately influences cities. So the first one is fairly obvious, and we'll start there. Autonomous vehicles. Certainly it's been a pretty significant topic most recently. Some people will sort of say it's 5 years, it'll take 10, 20 years to kind of come to fruition. It's much shorter than that. And people say, oh, we've got so many cars on the roadway, there's no possible way we can replace all these cars, and we've got so much infrastructure. Well, the adaptability and the machine learning that's going on with devices, there are kind of kits that you can buy to change and make your car semi-autonomous today. So, and those kind of are kits that are very affordable for anybody in this audience. And so, there's a tremendous amount of investment that's going on in that category. And it's not only sort of auto companies, but it's technology companies. Google, Apple are all investing big in this. And, sort of a leader in it currently, sort of I would say Tesla and also Ford is making massive investments, are already got so many cars on the roadway that are collecting data to do exactly this. Another interesting kind of place for this is the on-demand vehicles. I mean, we're actually seeing the privatization of public transit. I think the nature of what's happening now with sort of the crisis that's happening in city infrastructure and so forth, we're going to see more privatization of things that are traditionally provided from a public standpoint. And then this notion about self-driving trucks. And what does that mean for the delivery of goods and services in society? And we're already seeing the massive change, I'll tell you from a real estate perspective, that's happening in the industrial sector, the last mile. And so we are now, I think Prologis was one of the first ones here locally that is doing a multi-story industrial facility close into Seattle. And so the key thing is how close can you be, because people want this kind of just-in-time, service and delivery. And then, each one of these things I'm going to kind of talk about the technology, and then I'm going to talk about, why care, right? And I kind of will kind of post some things and some things that I've been thinking about, but also kind of cause you to think about, what do these changes really mean? What do they mean for our cities? And so when you think about autonomous vehicles and that human error really comprises about 95% of the accidents out there, this really changes the safety notion of our streets, right? I mean, do people suddenly feel more safer to be out on a bicycle? What happens to the insurance industry, if basically you're not having accidents anymore? The changes in locational preference and therefore the value of cities, right? So if now I don't mind being in a car if I'm not actually driving it, it's somewhat more like I've got like a 30 or 40 minute commute on a train where I could actually, God forbid, stare at a device for 30 or 40 minutes and not, subject other people to potentially damages of my texting and driving. Or I can take phone calls. I might structure my day, and therefore, the location of businesses might find the more sort of this back to this notion of edge cities, or less of a core, or more fragmented or distributed cities. Does that really change? Because really, if we think about it, cities are really kind of an economic structure, and land value is really a function of transportation cost. And so if we're kind of, transporting ourselves a bit differently via autonomous vehicles, does that change the notion of land value? And then certainly changes in jobs, right? I mean, what's remarkable is if you look at this map, those are the predominant occupations in each one of the states. Kind of chuckle about software developer in Washington State, but I mean, look how often truck driver is mentioned, right? There's a massive amount of our population that receive their compensation and their livelihood from driving, and this is just truck drivers. I mean, everybody knows somebody who's driving for Uber, right? At least supplementing income. So I think the nature of jobs in general is really going to shift. And so there's the whole notion about what happens with downtown areas and parking, right? It's 31% of our downtown areas are parking facilities. And I recently saw the stat that we have actually over 1 billion parking places in the U.S. for basically 237 million cars. So 4 times the amount of parking spaces. So if cars can basically kind of locate where they need to park, what do you do? And obviously increased road capacity. And there's a bit of debate about this, right? Because I actually own a Tesla, and I think for April Fool's Day, they had this kind of ticket avoidance download that you could get. So essentially, you could park your car, and if the car sensed that a cop was going to give you a ticket, it would go and circle the block. It was a healthy joke, but in essence, there's this kind of notion that if cars are all kind of circling around, you really decrease capacity, or do you really increase the road capacity when cars are circulating? And it's a good question, but I've got to think that there's eventually an algorithm that talks to all the cars and, and advises sort of when things can kind of get back on the roadway. And so then, what is the potential of all these underutilized spaces? I mean, with the massive amounts of computing power that we're kind of coming forward and the needs for server, I mean, do parking garages become server rooms? Do they become options for just-in-time delivery and storage, because there's this deep need for, bringing goods and services closer to people? I don't know. But a lot of developers who are developing projects today and realize that they don't deliver 3, 4, 5 years from now think that this change is rapidly coming, so they're not doing sloped parking garages, right? They're doing flat plate parking garages so that they can actually be usable in the future. And then the pathways, Elon Musk and his Boring company, right? He has this concept of basically creating, for lack of a better term, wormholes throughout, cities that essentially I could be at home and say, hey, yeah, I want to be at the office by 8 a.m. And then essentially, the car tells me when I need to be, in the car, because essentially I've got my slot to get into the wormhole and get to downtown. So it's a little bit sort of George Jetson-y, but a little bit probably below grade. And he has this plan for basically starting in LA because he's noticing traffic is really affecting his life. So it's nice to be a billionaire. Reinforcement learning, next technology. This is actually pretty interesting stuff. I recently went to the MIT conference on machine learning and deep learning, and there's some definite ethical issues about this. But the best way to think about this is if you have a simulation such as the one that's kind of on the screen here of teaching sort of a stick figure how to walk, right? And it kind of falls and falls and eventually picks itself up, and it's perfecting the algorithm of itself, right? To kind of how do I need to hold and where do I need to distribute weight and move different joints in the body to essentially learn how to walk. And eventually the algorithm picks up and it can teach itself how to walk in 30 seconds, right? Now, once it's learned that, guess what? It's not like a child that every computer needs to learn it, right? The bot teaches the bot, so the bot transfers the information to the next bot, right? So the ability for machine and machine learning of advancing, technology is remarkable. And so anything that's kind of an algorithm that can be taught or learned can be transferred to the next machine. Now, where this becomes really interesting is that in healthcare now, okay, the ability for all the machine learning that's coming forward, the reinforcement learning that's coming forward, machines can now predict cancer 85% better than a doctor. This is looking at imagery, just through patterns and learning. And so if you think about what's going to be happening in medical and healthcare, the advancement of ideas and the advancement of sort of knowledge is just going to be so rapid. So what does this mean? Well, I think, for healthcare, people are going to be living longer. So, what does that look like in terms of the contribution of more elderly people or the changes in the structure of our cities and the contribution of that? I think it's kind of interesting to think about. I haven't thought that much about it. But we also have certainly economic considerations, when we think about sort of Social Security and so forth. But aside from that, just the dynamic and how can we integrate more of sort of the different ages into population, given that so many people are going to be living a lot longer. And definitely the nature of work. The one thing I sort of think about what's really important is anything that can be sort of memory or can be a repetition or can be a formula or can be written down or an algorithm will basically be replaced. And so the real value, which is kind of a beautiful thing from a human perspective, is going to be really strongly right brain. So it's going to be those interactions, those abilities to read empathy, those abilities to sort of see things that can't be written in a formula is really where our incredible value is. And that's what's really going to depend on human connection, and cities are a big piece of that, right? Recognition interfaces, just want to touch this because there's a lot of advancement moving forward. It'll change the way in which we access things. It'll probably change the way in which we, feel or don't feel secure. There's a lot of technology actually coming out of China that's changing this. And so the theory, not the theory, but the practice of this is that your access to things that feel as though it is a little bit constrained should sort of speed up, and particularly as we think about buildings or ferry lines or toll places or whatever. So just a quick note on that technology. I think Boaz touched this pretty well. The only thing I think that's really interesting about these mixed realities that are kind of coming forward is really kind of, three things. One is this visualization of things that aren't present now, and I think Boaz gave a lot of really good explanations of that. The augmented learning, which I think is really pretty phenomenal. If you think about it from an education perspective, I know that the NFL has utilized the sort of augmented virtual reality worlds to basically teach players certain sort of routines and so forth without necessarily having to take a hit. So there's ways of like reinforcing learning, and actually the body doesn't decipher what is real from what is augmented or what is sort of put in through a headset. I've had my own personal experience with this because I'm a cyclist, and I utilize an application called Strava. I don't actually put on a headset, but I have a giant screen in front of me, and I'm on basically what I'd call sort of a hamster wheel, right? You're sort of on a trainer, but the trainer is reading computer information, and I'm basically riding these hills, or actually there's a course where I'm riding through London. So I insert myself, I have my little avatar, I've designed it, with my little ponytail, so it kind of looks like me, right? I can change the views, so it's like Tour de France view and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's this particular view, right, where I'm just following. And I realize as I kind of crest a hill and I'm like coming down the hill, and you kind of all know when you're on a bike and you come down a hill and you kind of pop back up the hill and you feel the force of the bike underneath you. So I'm coming down the hill, I'm racing, and then all of a sudden I don't feel the force of the bike underneath me, and I feel like I'm flying off my bike. And I'm like, oh my God, my brain thought I was outside, exercising. And it was really a sign to me, and interesting about that whole system, it's very communal. So I'm cycling with 100 people around the world, right? They have like their little flags from the countries, and you're waving, and you're texting to each other. So normally I'd just be pedaling around in my garage on a cold, dark Seattle day by myself, and probably only doing about 20 minutes where I could stay an hour. But it gives me the sense of social. It gives me the sense of also of actually cycling outside when it's not so nice outside. But that reinforcement learning they're showing more and more that your brain can't decipher the difference between real and also this alternative reality, which if you think about it, if you're sitting in the classroom, would you rather sort of hear an instructor, no offense, on a podium, repeating things, or really experiencing it? Because that could be really profound to learning. And so does that change the way we think about education? Does that change the nature and what our schools look like? Does that change academic institutions? I think so. And so it's kind of interesting to think about. The other thing to think about too is esports. I don't know how many of you are following sort of what's going on in esports, but it's rather remarkable. The athletes in esports, and what I'm talking about is gaming, okay? They spend just as much time practicing as an NFL athlete, right? There are teams in esports that are also sponsored, and I believe Magic Johnson has bought a couple of esports teams. There's a massive amount of winnings. I think there was Key Arena actually had the Dota sort of Olympics, right? And the awards to the winning team was somewhere right around, I think, $9 million. Okay, so the 4 players, did pretty well. And esports, the consumption and the activity that's happening in esports, and we're talking spectators. So people go to Key Arena, they'll fill a stadium of 60,000 people to watch people game. And what's happening with NFL right now? Viewership is down. So the way in which we consume athletics, sports, how is that going to shape our cities? When we start to feel as though that sport might be something different than a couple of, 12, well, I say the 12th man, but 11 people on a field, clashing against another 11 people. So Quickly, material sciences. I think one of the most interesting thing that's kind of happening, definitely in all the rapid prototyping, but the new material graphene, which is reportedly the strongest material in science, material known. It has really conductivity, so people are using it for solar cells. It's stronger than titanium. They're beginning to think about it for airline, for air manufacturing or for airplane manufacturing. And so, with the rapid prototyping and with what's happening with construction, the production of how we build cities and how we, now, quickly, I'm realizing I'm close out of time and there's a story I want to tell. But I was involved in an application that Google was making that would actually read zoning codes. And it would read zoning codes and then interpret sort of the massing that you could actually produce. And then it would develop drawings, a structural set. You can decide what type of structure you wanted to put. Was it wood, or was it metal, or was it steel, or was it concrete? And then it could rapid prototype, something in the city. Well, more and more the robotics that's coming forward, and printing of concrete and printing of glass and printing of metal, if you think about the speed of production of what we might be able to do, and the reason why they're doing this is Google's always trying to solve a problem, and they're realizing we have a housing problem. So how can we produce housing cheaper and faster, and still, have that aspect of humanity to it? So I think Charles Moore, who really eloquently said, who basically created Moore's law, where the computing power would basically double every couple of years, 18 months, I think it was. He said, change will never be this slow again. So if we think about sort of our cities and the production, the rapid prototyping that's kind of happening, and the potential of 3D printing concrete in buildings, change will never be this slow again. So lastly, just to kind of touch how to thrive in all this, I really think it's about maximizing our experience. It's about focusing on how people can remain connected together, both in terms of space, collisions, and realizing, I think there was a period, certainly in the 70s and the 80s, when we created Place of Work. It was about sort of, people as a machine. And I think how we're going to get the best out of people and the best out of humanity is really creating places that allow for that social interaction in those collisions, because that's what's going to offer the innovation and the creativity to everything that we do. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.